There are riots going on in France like you wouldn't imagine. All sorts of places are being torched by the masses. Why? It was all triggered by a traffic police cop who shot and killed a 17-year-old boy of Algerian descent, all because he drove off from the traffic police.
Why is this 17-year-old being repeatedly referred to as a boy? That word isn't neutral. It's chosen deliberately to frame him as young, harmless, and innocent. But let's be honest, a 17-year-old is barely any different from an 18-year-old adult, legally or physically. And more importantly, in Islam, a 17-year-old is not considered a child. In Sahih al-Bukhari 26-64, we are told that Muhammad allowed 15-year-olds to fight in battle. Allah's messenger called me to present myself in front of him or the eve of the Battle of Uhud while I was 14 years of age at that time, and he did not allow me to take part in that battle, but he called me in front of him on the eve of the Battle of the Trench when I was 15 years old, and he allowed me to join the battle. Nafi said, I went to Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who was caliph at that time, and related the above narration to him. He said, this age, 15, is the limit between childhood and manhood, and wrote to his governors to give salaries to those who reach the age of 15. So let's be consistent. If you call a 17-year-old a child, then you are saying Muhammad used child soldiers. You can't have it both ways. Either he was a child, and Islamic tradition endorses sending children into battle, or he wasn't a child, and we should stop using emotionally manipulative language like boy to describe someone nearly at full adulthood. And it doesn't stop there. The phrase, all because he drove off from the traffic police, sounds like it was some trivial misunderstanding, as if he was just a confused teen making a harmless mistake. But that's not what the facts say. According to Reuters, this was not his first time evading police. He was known to police for previous incidents in which he failed to comply with traffic stops, the local prosecutor Pascal Prache said. An officer has acknowledged firing a lethal shot, the prosecutor said, telling investigators he wanted to prevent another chase, fearing he or another person would be hurt. Fleeing from a police stop is not a minor issue. It's dangerous, especially when done by someone with a history of non-compliance. High-speed chases kill people. They kill pedestrians. They kill children. Imagine this driver had run over a Muslim family while fleeing. Would the public outrage be the same? Or would everyone be demanding to know why the officer didn't act? Of course, full investigations are necessary. But when mass riots erupt, cities burn, and mobs destroy property over someone who repeatedly endangered others, we need to stop and ask, is this really justice? Or is it selective outrage fueled by tribal identity and media manipulation?
Reuters News says that most of the victims have been black and Arab.
Could that be because those are the people committing the most amount of crimes? I am not saying they are, but let's not jump to the conclusion of racism. Maybe these groups are simply committing most of the crimes.
Last year, there were 13 similar killings, and this year, there were 3. So I guess the people have had enough.
So let me get this straight. 16 people shot by police over 2 years, many of whom were repeat offenders or fleeing lawful stops. And that's enough for people to say they've had enough and start rioting, torching cities, and attacking institutions? Okay then, if that's what enough looks like, then when do we start rioting about Islamic terrorism, which has killed far more innocent people, not just in France, but around the world, day after day after day? And to be clear, no, I'm not calling for riots. I don't believe they're moral or effective, but if we're talking about what the public has had enough of, then let's be honest. We've all had enough of jihadist terrorism. That's the real plague. That's what people are truly sick to death of. Take just one example. In 2021, a female French police official, a mother of 2, was stabbed in the throat by a Tunisian-born man shouting, Allahu Akbar. Where were the riots for her? Where was the Muslim outrage for that innocent life, or others killed in similar attacks? Instead, we hear endless complaints about Islamophobia and perceived racism, while staying largely silent about the literal, global, and ongoing terrorism committed in the name of Islam. Why? And why do so many of these attacks involve cutting the necks of victims? While I acknowledge that Quran 47:4 refers to a battlefield context, it's impossible to ignore how often this specific imagery is replicated in modern terrorist attacks. As Jihad Watch points out, it must furthermore be noted that the Quran literally incites Mohammedans to violence, for example in Surah 47 verse 4. So when you meet the kuffar, strike their necks. Incitement to violence is a criminal offense. Please note that this surah mentions the kuffar, the unbelievers. Christians qualify as kuffar. It is because of this surah that in many terrorist attacks, the focus is on cutting the necks of the intended victims. The surah quoted is only one of many inciting to violence or insulting whole groups, such as the Jews. This is not poetry. This is taken literally by extremists. The verse refers to kuffar, unbelievers, and yes, Christians and Jews qualify. It's no surprise, then, that many terrorist attacks focus on beheading, throat-slitting, and knife killings. France knows this better than most. It remains the country most affected by Islamist terrorism within Europe, with recent data showcasing a total of 82 Islamist attacks and 332 deaths from 1979 to 2021. And yet, where's the uproar? Where are the nightly news headlines exposing Islam? Where is the mass outcry from Muslim communities? Where are the global protests about this pattern of violence? How many innocent lives must be lost before nations finally admit the obvious, that radical Islam poses a serious threat to life, liberty, and national security? Apparently, no amount of blood, not even when it's their own civilians, women, children, or police officers, is enough to shift focus to the real crisis. Here's the harsh truth. If a nation does not care about the lives of its own people, it will not survive. If you are more outraged by police killing criminals than by terrorism, your moral compass is broken. If you care more about fighting racism than you do Islamism, you are morally corrupt. If you ignore the blood of your fellow citizens to preserve a narrative, you are complicit in your nation's decline. And if nothing changes, there may come a time when there is no nation left to protect. If you don't defend your people, you won't have a people. If you don't defend your nation, you won't have a nation. If you let radicals into your nation, you are murdering your nation.
Why the traffic police even have guns is beyond me. Why the traffic police even have guns is beyond me. Why the traffic police even have guns is beyond me. Why the traffic police even have guns is beyond me.
Does that sound like the concern of someone who cares about the lives of French police officers? Does it sound like someone who's worried about public safety? Is that what you'd expect from a person who wants France to thrive and remain a secure, prosperous nation? To me, it sounds like the exact opposite. If I wanted to weaken a nation, one of the first steps I'd take would be to weaken its police force, disarm them, defund them, and destroy public confidence in them. That would make perfect sense if I were, say, an Islamist with a long-term plan to destabilize and eventually dominate the country. You let the Islamist population grow, wait for social order to collapse, and then strike when the system is most vulnerable. Now, I'm not suggesting this particular man is doing that, but if he were, this line of thinking would make perfect strategic sense. This man says it's beyond him why traffic police have guns, as if he's incapable of even imagining a reason. Is that genuine ignorance? Or is it malevolent posturing? Because frankly, no one is that stupid. Not in a Europe that has faced countless terror attacks, knife rampages, vehicle rammings, and stabbings of officers. This brings us to an important and recurring question. Is it malice or ignorance? Sometimes yes, people truly don't know what they're talking about. But as the Talmud says, an ignoramus cannot be pious. If someone lacks ethical and intellectual clarity, they're not neutral. They're a liability and potentially dangerous. They may not be intentionally lying, but the result is the same. They spread lies, mislead the public, and erode safety. Ignorant people spread lies by default. So let me spell it out clearly. This is why all police officers, including traffic police, should carry firearms. 1. Protection against terrorism and violent criminals. We literally just discussed a female French officer stabbed in the throat by an Islamic terrorist. A gun won't guarantee survival, but it drastically increases your chances. What's the plan when someone charges at an officer with a knife? Use a taser? That's delusional. Tasers often miss and only have one shot. What then? Pray? Terrorists aren't the only threat. There are mentally unstable individuals, violent offenders, and criminals with knives, and sometimes even guns. If the criminal is armed but the police aren't, the police die. 2. Deterrence. When criminals know officers are armed, they're far less likely to resist, fight back, or try anything reckless. Firearms in the hands of trained officers prevent violence by making the risks too high for most offenders. That's a deterrent, and deterrence saves lives. 3. Stopping vehicle threats. There are real scenarios where a suspect uses a vehicle as a weapon, ramming into crowds or fleeing recklessly. A taser won't shoot through a windshield. A baton won't stop a moving car. Sometimes the only way to protect lives is to shoot the driver, and traffic police are often the first and only responders in such moments. These are basic, common-sense reasons. They aren't complicated. So when someone says they can't even fathom why traffic officers carry guns, we must ask, is this foolishness or intentional corruption? Because it's not just wrong, it's immoral. To advocate disarming police is to undermine public safety, endanger officers, and empower criminals. It is an attempt to spread chaos and weakness in the land. And whether that's out of ignorance or ideology, it is evil, and it needs to stop. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.